Cap. What's up, Chase?
Not a whole lot. So this is going to be the 6th Briarcliff Sessions podcast, or Briarcliff Conversations, what we're calling. Some people smarter than me with marketing told me that we should drop the sessions and call this thing Briarcliff, and then we can. So this is Briarcliff Conversations. And then the sessions will be the videos that we started with that you did, and then Briarcliff does live events, does all the other things that we do. So
I was going to say, when you first brought this up to me, the first thing I thought of was how Sun Studios would run, and how they would have a radio station right in a separate room, either above or across the other side of the building from the main studio. Somebody watching this will probably correct me like a motherfucker, but
yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, but that's how Sun Studios was run, and that's that was just a whole machine, and you're planning on building a machine, which is awesome.
Yeah, well, okay, so God, I don't know. I haven't said this anywhere, so I guess I should. So a lot of the idea is based on Motown,
right?
Okay, so everyone's moving to Charlotte. For good reason. There's more people every day. Okay, so the same as everyone was moving to Detroit for the automotive boom in the 50s, and then Gordy had money. It was strangely, I don't know the whole story, but there was some family money that he got them to invest, and then they started Motown in the Hitsville house. Right?
I didn't realize that was the origin of it.
Right, and so basically, there's no person without a place, essentially.
Right.
So, studied philosophy, and Martin Heidegger said that human being was always being somewhere, and so there's no real universal human nature. When you talk about a person, you say, okay, what's their language? What's their culture? Where are they? And so, in terms of that, we can't have a great Motown artist without a Detroit, and we can't have a Nirvana without a Seattle,
right?
And we can't have a Cap without a Charlotte, and we can't have a Briarcliff without a Charlotte. And so the community that we build is the place is what will create the people. There's no Plato without an Athens, etc., and it goes on and on and on. There's no Bird without the the New York jazz scene,
or even Muscle Shoals, Alabama.
Right.
Just a small town, middle of nowhere, Alabama, produced some of the biggest and greatest music of all time.
Right.
Just kind of in a really isolated kind of environment with nothing going on. I had a friend of mine that told me about the experience, and he said that there's only one place to eat, that kind of thing, and everybody knows each other.
Right. That's and so I know the vibe that I think we've started to create here, and I'm always kind of beating myself up about whether or not I'm accomplishing what I set out to, but when I was in college and we were trying to make the first Senseless Beatings record. It was just sorry.
I was going to say, I had a quick question on Senseless Beatings. Was that a hardcore band, or?
It was like a prog rock band. It was kind of like Genesis and Yes meets the National Flamin' Lips to some extent.
Okay. Very melodic still, with a lot of atmosphere. We
had a flautist, and so the core of a lot of it was by the time we were doing the record anyway, was the acoustic guitar and the flute. And so we wrote most of the demos over the summer with the acoustic and the flute, and then I'd sent them to the drummer who was away from college, and I'd send him the demos, and then the plan was to record it all in the fall. It was my last semester of college.
Right.
And so what I'd done is we rented a house, and me and Mike Dove is one of the producers now, and Thomas, who
killer
was
guitar player too,
right, unbelievable, and he was our bassist Thomas, and then some other folks were always revolving in and out of there, and so we recorded a brass section for a song, because there was a lot of music majors, and then me and Joe, the flautist, were philosophy majors. So we worked out this the lyrics and mostly. There was a couple other people who wrote on the first one, but 10 of the 12 I wrote, and then it was like this thematic thing, this after history. So I had the idea, and then I became obsessed with it. Wrote the whole thing in the summer, and then we recorded it that fall, and it was like trial by fire.
Right.
I just had to set up, figure out how to engineer, so nothing was recorded.
What was this on like? What computer equipment are we talking here?
Oh, I mean, as far as that, it was like the rock bottom budget Tascam.
Kind of like the ones that are set on wheels, or the okay.
It was a rack. It was a rack mount digital interface.
Gotcha.
I think it's 1831, 1861, something like that. And it was like, the thing about it was it was like $300, and it had like your digital audio converters and like 8 like preamps.
I was about to ask.
And so, like, what we did, because our music was like had a lot of time changes in it and things, so what we did is we recorded the rhythm section all live together, and then we overdubbed the flute and the vocals, and then a few of them were built to a click and all that. So it was like a mix of live and track by track.
I was going to say, imagine recording a flautist was kind of like a whole thing too, with like mic placement and feedback, the whistle and
Right.
everything a flute does. How harsh it can be.
Oh, and
you're in the room with one.
And I guarantee you, we never got it right. I mean,
Really?
nah, in like 7 years, I don't think we ever really got it right. We tried a lot of different stuff. I mean, it just wasn't like now. We didn't have a treated room. We didn't have. Now we would do things to dampen the reflections, but there's just so much you could do. And then we're using like your lower quality large diaphragm condensers and things.
Right.
So it'd always be like a harsh upper register. But anyway, I'm still proud of the arrangements and the performances, though. Because you have the lifeless sort of thing of like those lower quality pre's and mics, but
but the spirit was there at least.
Right. And so the vibe that we're talking about, like of Motown or anything like that, there was a drummer, Martin. He came in and did some percussion parts with us, and for some other people I was recording, and he was just like, I just feel like there's something special about this place, but just the house that we had in the hood in Rock Hill, and but what was special about it was that we were all there for one reason. So like every day, I would come home, I would obsess with the mixes because I was teaching myself. So the way I decided to do it was to do like 2 songs that were like kind of B-sides that weren't gonna be on the album, and I just like tried to get those finished quick and mix them and tweak them and do everything I could.
Did you have like all the time in the world to just figure it out as you were going along too, or because I know I've only mixed like one thing ever, and it was like an acoustic piece, so that was very there wasn't a whole lot to play with.
Well, I got lucky in that, like, I don't know if it was luck, but because I mean, it was kind of everybody was selected, to be around, but people just be walking by me while I was trying to EQ the harmonic out of a snare drum. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so like we would learn, all of us would be kind of working on it together, and then somebody would be like, no, you got to do this. And then we'd take the band and narrow it and crank the gain up and find the annoying frequency and try to bring it out. And all these little tricks of the trade, we would just pick up one by one, and it was just a group effort. And I mean, I still have some After History discs that I've kept around, but I think I remixed some of it for like the Bandcamp, but later. But the original mixes and the scope of it was all there, and the spirit was there.
Yeah, and that's sometimes the most important part, because sometimes you'll hear like quality recorded, pieces of music and songs, but the actual songs and pieces of music can be hot garbage, even with all the best equipment in the world.
Explain the whole concept of all 3 of them.
Oh well, I don't really want to make it about what I
I'm curious,
did before.
though.
Okay, so I didn't plan it all from the beginning, which that would be a mistake. I think in general in art, to try to plan it to a T, because you want to just find that you want to find the intention wherever it lands.
I always believe in having a good skeleton with an arrangement or a song or whatever you're going to choose to record. That way, if the skeleton's there or like the canvas is there, all you got to do is paint on top of it with whatever colors you want. Whether it's, I'm being a guitar player, I like the idea of painting with like different guitar sounds and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure you went with something similar with this.
Well, so what I did, I had the idea. So we had finally just a collection of songs, and there was this like Senseless Beatings. The band really started as like a quasi jokey kind of thing. There was this, my friend that I admired, Blake. He played and sang really well, and so I really just wanted to be in a band with him.
Right.
So I wanted him to be the singer, and we had co-written a couple songs together, and that was the beginning of it. But then I just kept duping more people into coming to play with me, right? And so eventually I found a good drummer, and we had the bassist, and we had a flute, and then Blake took off to California after he graduated. So then it was like I was kind of at the helm. I'd written the majority of the songs, but most of the songs were, I was like, oh, we should record this because we're all doing whatever. And it was just going to be the smattering of random songs I'd written to that point. But then that summer, I pretended I'd already graduated from college to get a job as the assistant manager of a Taco Bell.
You just needed that money.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, it's like another semester costs money.
Well, and if I wouldn't have put the income from the assistant manager job at Taco Bell, I wouldn't have been able to get the house that we were renting that summer.
There you go.
So I was working this job, and they were making me train like out in Lancaster, but I lived in Rock Hill. So I was driving this thing and working these like 10, 11-hour days at a Taco Bell, you know what I mean? And on the ride out, I'd been, this is basically my super senior of philosophy, because I was literally dragging it out so that I could do a certain seminar with a certain professor. This is the level of nerdery that operates. I don't really let a whole lot of stuff happen by accident. So I wanted to be in this senior seminar with this particular professor, so I drug that out. And also I thought it'll give me student loan money and a light schedule so I can record this record. But at the time, I didn't know what the record was going to be. So I was on my way to Taco Bell. I'd been reading Mark Taylor, who's this postmodern philosophy professor at Chicago, University of Chicago. He was my professor's professor.
Okay.
And I'd read 5 or 6 of his texts, and one of the things they were talking about was this war over water that was coming in the next century, war over clean drinking water. And there's a lot of stuff in there about the end of history, which every sort of, a lot of religions, most religions, and then also most systems of philosophy have some sort of end of history, not most, but a lot, have a sort of an end of history narrative. So like for Hegel, Christianity was the end of religious history, because to him there was Jewish religion of just one God, that sort of idea, and then there was the idea of the many gods and the human gods. You put them together, you have a god that's in the body of a man and lives among people like the Greek gods at times, but then you still have one God, right? And,
a lot of parallels.
And so he thought that was the end. That was the end of that thing. You could go no further. You either have men as gods and that sort of thing. And anyway, he thought it was the end. There's a lot more to it than that.
Then it becomes I watched an episode of a TV show. It was called The Orville last night, where it kind of plays on that, where society progresses every 11 minutes, but in their time it's like thousands of years, that kind of thing.
So, kind of and
they kind of play on the idea of deities and stuff like that in those time zones too. Yeah.
Well, I guess what I mean is just that it's easier with the war thing that I come to. So after what I started thinking is World War II was kind of the end of history, because you have these this nuclear sort of deterrent from war, and then the power structure of the most powerful nations were it felt like they were set. Now things are shaking up like crazy with new technology.
There you go. I was about to say, but yeah, especially during World War II, I can't imagine where it's like such a shift happens, and I felt like we felt a shift here, like 9/11 even.
Right. Well, it's like it's not going to be the same after that. It's like a watershed moment. So the
pandemic's up there with that too.
Yeah, and that and that it's not going back. And anyway, the same. I mean, a lot of reason we could that this is a thing. That these
exactly.
are. But so the idea for the records was World War II sort of put us in this state where it's always going to be the same kind of capitalist thing. Like, you might have punk rock come up and it'll be sort of anarcho-communist. It's like this kind of revolutionary movement, or you have like the pacifists and the hippies and things. But what ends up happening is those cultures get taken and then marketed back to the people.
Mm-hmm. Like the hippies, like you were saying, like that whole the hippie dream, the '67 version of the hippies,
right?
But they forgot about what happens at the end with Charles Manson and all that, or they can't sell that,
right? Well, they'll take it and they'll take the marketable part, and so all of a sudden now, like wearing bell bottoms and tie dye, it doesn't have anything to do with the original ideas. It's just some way to sell something.
Yeah.
Same as like now everybody can wear the skinny jeans or the girl jeans and pretend they're in one of the sort of punk movements or something like that.
I mean, you still see a lot of that,
right? And so it just becomes a commercial product instead of like this revolution that it intended to be. Mm-hmm. And so the capitalists can always sell things back to us. So we're stuck in this one mode. We're never getting out of it. Is how I was picturing it. So, and then I thought, well, what's the next record? We did a whole record about that, sort of being the first part of it's like about World War II and then the things that happen, like people losing each other and
the military industrial complex.
Right, the whole deal. Like it had a song in there about Harry Truman. I thought it was there was all this religious language around it. Like, so it was like the Trinity was the name of the project where they developed the first nuclear bomb.
I mean, like that was America. Kind of like full-fledged at the time. Still kind of is in a lot of ways. There's
no sort of teasing out the religion and the philosophy from what it happens.
Right.
And so a lot of what I was trying to ask was, if the Enlightenment thinking was so good, then how did we end up in such a bad place? And where we have genocide and nuclear war. And then the themes, and a lot of the themes were that, like, everyone on both sides, a lot of the countries were sort of all supposedly Christian nations or enlightened nations, right? Mm-hmm. They were supposed to be the product of all this great historical progress, and then look what happened. And so it was like, okay, well, if we can't have like a revolution, because what are you going to do? Just get nuked out of existence.
Right.
The government's too powerful, etc. So what can you do? And I was like, well, what about the religious experience? Like, what is that? And so the next record was about that. And then the difficulty of getting to this sort of religious enlightened experience. So together, the records were called After History, We Will Walk into the Sea, because the oceanic feeling that Freud talks about. So after history, we'll walk into the sea, remembering the shore, remembering that it's how difficult it is to forgive, to love, to do all these things that can give us relief from the suffering of, like, I don't know, the everyday monotony of life,
Yeah.
And
something that keeps you grounded and all that stuff.
Right. So I don't know if we really needed a detour into my defunct prog rock band, but
I've been in the first defunct band that I was part of was called No Power, No Crown. That kind of had something where it's like they tackled a lot of spiritual themes and a lot of that kind of subject matter too, over like detuned heavy guitars and a guy rapping on top of it.
So what? How did your musicianship start? I think you said something about. No, that wasn't you. That was Brandon who told me about Led Zeppelin, right?
Well, yeah, I remember having that conversation with Brandon before about how big of a Led Zeppelin fan he was, and that's how he wanted that's how he decided he wanted to play bass, was John Paul Jones. And I got into guitar through Joe Walsh and the Eagles.
Okay.
But it wasn't until I got a Led Zeppelin DVD and watched live concert footage from like Madison Square Garden, 1974, and I already had a few Led Zeppelin CDs. I was 12 years old. I wasn't buying like vinyl back then or anything like that. But that wasn't like pushed as hard as it is these days, where vinyl's outselling CDs now. But now I had a couple of Led Zeppelin CDs. It was 2 and a live album, the accompaniment live album to the DVD that had come out in the time. And Jimmy Page, him playing that double neck SG on Stairway to Heaven. That was the moment where I was like, I want to learn how to play guitar. I want one right now, and nothing's going to stop me, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. And how old were you then?
I was 15.
15.
16. Yeah, more like 16.
Now, when you started playing, did you immediately become one of the kids at school that everybody kind of looked to as a player?
Not really, because I wasn't. See, there were kids that were better than me at school that already had that kind of like guitar spot. Phil, like there was this one guy who could already play like all of Jimi Hendrix and all the other stuff that I aspired to do, and I was just getting started. I was learning like Malcolm Young riffs and stuff like that, and a lot of Rush too, but only like the chords and stuff like that.
Well, I guess high school is so weird because I didn't play at all. I was like a enthusiast almost because I had friends that would play, and I would be a big fan of their bands and stuff. And I didn't start playing until my senior year, and by that time people knew me as the wrestling kid or whatever.
Nice.
You know what I mean? So it was like lifting weights and wrestling was my thing. And then I was trying to get in, but there would always be like you say, there were the kids who made it like a part of their identity super early. So I remember I would walk into the lobby in my high school before classes, and there were certain people who would bring their acoustic guitars, and they would just be jamming out in the lobby, and
I may or may not have been that guy at one point.
my good friend John was one of those, and it was its own little culture, and then some of them would play in the church band, and stuff like that. But I
was going to say, what songs were they playing? What were their go-to acoustic guitar songs?
There was a lot of Metallica fascination. A lot of people trying to play just the first bit of one, and it was always like a thing. It was
interesting.
Your goal, the goal. I remember when I started playing, my goal was to be able to play the solo from one, which now I don't care about at all.
I know, I gave up on that a long time ago.
I might, no, I probably can't do it, but maybe if I really cared, I would. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there was a time where I did, where I would get the guitar magazines, and they would push heavy metal quite a bit, so you'd be getting tabs of a lot of Metallica songs and a lot of Megadeth and a lot of Lamb of God, because they were just starting to blow up at the time too. And I'm sitting there going maybe this is what it takes to actually be good, is to learn all these heavy metal songs. Because there was they would push Led Zeppelin and blues rock here and there, and that was more of my jam than say heavy metal. Everybody was playing Metallica or something like that. I'm sitting there trying to play a Kiss song or something like that, something that none of my classmates cared about at all.
It's somehow I got it. There's this thing where there were the sort of elitists, the hipsters of sorts that would that I almost forgot about this culture, because it doesn't really exist now the same way, because everybody can just go look up anything on the internet.
Yeah.
But at that time, there was sort of the for me, there was the praise and worship band at the youth group, and they were the people the musicians I might know the best.
That's how it was where I grew up too.
And then there were some kids in the youth group that started their own bands, that they had other bands, and then they were we're heavier, or we're more this, or more that, and you started noticing there was these people were trying to measure who knew the most, or what.
Exactly. You had the youth counselor who listened to Pantera and would nerd out with you about just Judas Priest and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah, there was a lot of heavy Christian music, and I guess the first acquired taste I had was like the screaming, like the heavy screaming stuff. I had to be like, okay, this doesn't sound good to me right now as a kid who grew up listening to like radio country or whatever, but let me kind of get into it and see what it's about. And then once you started looking up lyrics and you find, and I learned, something cannot seem that good. But then if you really take your time and get into it, and that led me to liking all kinds of other genres of music later. There's this band, Thrice, that I was obsessed with.
They were big in that kind of Christian rock scene, right?
And they would do, and they would recommend everything from like Damien Rice to Refused, and like their website had like, sort of what they were listening to and what they were reading. And that had a pretty big influence on me, with just to like kind of follow what their thought process was.
Right, because it was something different than what the norm was.
Right.
It's like I had a friend of mine that was like that, who was like the one hipster in the whole school, but he was cool. He introduced me. I remember him giving me a copy of Elvis Costello on CD. What 15, 16-year-old in the early 2000s listens to Elvis Costello.
Right.
And not only that, but a Bad Brains DVD, live from CBGB's. And that was one of those things where it's like I didn't get the music, but the energy just kind of like blew my mind, Yeah,
it's so important to like have those people to recommend the things, especially stuff from before your time, like because that's how I got into Tom Waits and different things like that.
I love Tom Waits.
And there's a lot of it's just like Elvis Costello is one, and now I try to, if I find something that was someone who was influential, I go back and listen. Like, it was way late in the game that it was like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that I listened to Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, and just like was just amazed by it, as like to take, just to hear how much imagination is in it with
with Brian Wilson and all that. That's one of those things that's why I love the later era Beatles so much, is to like, listen to that stuff. Same with Pet Sounds, and go, how did they think of this? And with all the limited equipment they had at the time too.
Yeah, apparently with Brian Wilson, it was like he would tell them the arrangements, and then they wouldn't know the whole idea. So that, what's the name of the band? Do you know the name of the band they were using?
Are you talking about like the studio guys?
Was it the Wrecking Crew?
The Wrecking Crew, yeah.
Right, okay.
They had Carol Kay on bass.
Yep. So the Wrecking Crew people didn't know what the final arrangement was going to sound like, because he would do it in bounce tracks and stuff.
Right.
And so all those beautiful things that they did, it's like to imagine how much logistical problems.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
I know. It's like, and that's you hear all the horror stories and stuff like that too. They made a whole movie about it, but it's one of those things like, how do you get that sound that you're looking for on a piece of analog equipment that has, but they were able to do it.
Right.
Maybe maybe they were able to do it to the best, to his imagination. We can't, read exactly what was on his mind at the time.
Right. Who knows what he would do with today's technology, if you know what I mean.
If he had he's still alive, but all he does is tour. But can you imagine if he was able to,
what, babe?
really channel in? I think she's saying that we ought to wrap up before we change the thing we got to change.
Okay, let's do that.
Talking to a friend of mine about Smashing Pumpkins today, about Siamese Dream.
Oh, I love that record. Yeah,
I do too. That's like the one that I would revisit the most when I was listening to Smashing Pumpkins a lot. Oh no, Billy Corgan's an odd one, so that's kind of one of those words I haven't revisited Smashing Pumpkins all that much, just because even though they put on a good show the one time I saw them.
So I know we said we'd talk about Brian Wilson, but
oh yeah, we just meant to switch to Smashing Pumpkins.
in the break we ended up talking about Billy Corgan.
Yeah.
Well, funny thing about that is, he bought the NWA, and so they had an open challenge. It was a work, an open challenge for the NWA World Title. And so, I was pretty much done wrestling, but I was like, but I ended up doing a promo video where I challenged the champion, I think it was Nick Aldis at the time, and I did a cover of Bullet with Butterfly Wings
Oh,
in
that's
the promo. And I was like, the world is a vampire, Billy, you know, and
That's awesome.
threatened to ride Nick Aldis to hell, and take the championship.
Who was your favorite promo guy?
Oh man. I mean, growing up, it was The Rock.
Yeah, he's
but
up there, top 5.
But it's kind of weird. In a way, I don't know. I mean, this was so strange. But like, it was The Rock, and then I don't know that I really was that captivated by anyone after like high school. But at the time, it
Right.
was the Kurt Angle was good too. A lot of those guys. But for me, when it came time to like kind of pattern myself, it was really just kind of I got my nickname from Terry Funk.
Yeah,
and,
which is awesome.
and so when I did a promo that was really off the wall for him, and he said, I think you could do like a Roddy Piper. And then after that, I started realizing people could see me as sort of unhinged, and so I would just lean into that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just was I would just mix all the people that I thought were the best orators I'd ever met, like little bits from each person. Like,
Or like, what about superstar Billy Graham?
I never really listened to a whole lot of his. I say.
Too sweet to be I'm the man of the hour. Too sweet to be sour.
Right.
He was the first rapper.
I liked Dusty Rhodes a lot.
Oh yeah,
and
Dusty's classic.
Yeah, and I had the one song that I wrote after him, and I based off of that. I've dined with kings and queens, and I've slept in alleys and dined on pork and beans. That was kind of that quote was kind of the inspiration for a song of mine, because the ups and downs. I mean, as a musician, as anyone in entertainment, or just trying to do something outside of just like the typical career path, like.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of showing up, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of this week I've got this amount of gigs, and next week I have nothing, and
Show business.
and then with wrestling, the likelihood you get injured and things like that, and that's when I wrote that song. As I was, felt like I was getting some momentum for the first time, and then I like separated my shoulder and was home, and so. It was just it was a wild thing.
Yeah, I bet. How did you get involved with Terry Funk?
Well, I met Manny Fernandez. Okay. So I'd wanted to be a professional wrestler when I was in high school, and went to a school right there in Easley with Brody Ray Chase. And I ended up like cracking my sternum, early on, and right when I started doing the pro shows there or whatever. And so I was still really, really green. And didn't want to admit I was really green, because I'd been like backyard wrestling and high school wrestling and all this other stuff, and thought I knew more than I did. But anyway, after I got hurt, I went to tech school and all this stuff, and started doing like a little bit of martial arts, like Muay Thai and catch can wrestling. And that taught me about the history of pro wrestling and the carnivals and the legit martial art side of it. And so it made me appreciate the history, but then I moved away to go to Winthrop. And when I was in that band, we opened for, it was a Sunday night, slow night.
Yeah.
We were starting out. And the bouncer was a pro wrestler.
Right on.
And so then I went down to this promotion in Chester, and I ended up like, I don't know, honestly, the extent of what happened, but the story that has been echoed back to me from how my friend Derek met me is that there was a kid there that was not acting right, and I put him in some kind of leg lock, probably a toe hold I learned from Catch Can, and anyway, that kid never came back to training, and there was a guy there, Cole McBee, who's still a promoter. And he told Derek about me, that I looked like I had some ability and I was in shape and all this sort of stuff. So then he he brought Manny Fernandez there, who
Right
had
on.
trained him. And Manny was like, all right, whatever, I'll see what I can do with this kid. And I met him up in Concord in some hot shed and trained with Manny. And then the next weekend, they had to call out of my job and go to West Virginia and wrestle at some convention where,
wow.
I was like back in wrestling for like 3 weeks, and all of a sudden I was in West Virginia wrestling this. I still have him on Facebook. This guy Kalua, and Tom Brandy interfered in the match, costing me the match. He pushed me off the top rope, and there was a lot of people there. It was a big show, and
But it's kind of like doing the band thing where like you call out of work to go play somewhere like 3 to 5 hours away. And
when we debuted at Ring of Honor,
oh, that's cool.
I just had to I knew, we had the opportunity to wrestle in Manhattan. And so I was like, I was out of sick days at this like marketing job I was doing when Suge and I met. And I was like, well, I guess this is it. I'll figure something else out. And of course I was like, well, obviously they're going to sign me. This is going to be no big deal.
Right.
So I just took the chance, went, and they actually didn't fire me then, but I didn't stay too much longer.
Right.
Because, again, we were starting to, like when me and Pete did that, we were a tag team called, his name is Peter Casa. And so, and then I was Cauliflower Brown. So we called the tag team Nuclear Casserole. And, we went to the ROH camp or whatever, and they saw us together, and then we made our debut in Manhattan. Then we went to Baltimore a few weeks later, and that caught the attention of, I guess, Gabe Sapolsky and or at least Trevin Adams, who was booking Full Impact Pro, which used to be the developmental for Ring of Honor, and then stayed a prominent indie that was under the Pro Wrestling WWN WWN label, I guess what you call it.
Right, but not like it's kind of like not WWE, but like just another separate promotion that kind of had some cash.
And it was I don't know about the cash part, but what they did is they would be like a pipeline. So a lot of people that were getting booked there would end up in WWE. It was a place where you could go, and people that were booked there were considered to be on the rise,
Like a farm promotion almost.
right? And so once we got made a splash, and I think we wrestled AR Fox, who was already a WWN guy and a well-known indie wrestler. So I guess we made some waves, and then they called us down there. And we went down there, and then they signed Pete, but not me. So I was, and this is after all stuff. So he ended up going on a tour of Japan, and I had to kind of rework the whole character, and figure out, what I needed to do as Cauliflower Brown to get going, So it was, and so it was a whole back to the drawing board, figure it out again, which
That's what Steve Austin had to do. Like I imagine a lot of folks have to do.
Well, it's what you have to do to become, the person you're supposed to be. Philosophically, the best analogy for this I found is the self is a sound that you only know by its echo.
I like that.
So, I don't know who I am because I don't appear to me.
Right.
Right? Like, how to say, this microphone is present to me, and it's present to you.
Yeah.
But my thoughts are only present to me.
Exactly.
And not really my thoughts, but my experience. I can tell you my thoughts, at least insofar as they're words. But anyway, I'm not present in the same way this microphone is. And so, I only know myself based off of the echo coming from the people around me.
Right.
And so, I think as artists in general and as people, we have our face, and it's not for us; it's for everybody else. Mm-hmm. People, nowadays, to tell somebody to smile and all this sort of stuff is sort of looked down upon, like you're trying to tell people to bottle up their emotions. But to me, it's not that you're trying to to show that you're invulnerable or something. It's that you're not trying to put your burdens on everybody else around you.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? The person that's your cashier at the 7-Eleven doesn't need to know you're having a bad day.
Right.
You know, it's just not the time for that. But anyway, as artists, you know, we have to give people something to go off of, and then we have to kind of figure out how they see us. And so in wrestling, you know, I went through this process where I thought because I was a little taller than him at the time, I was about 30 pounds heavier than this. And so I thought, like, since he was not as tall as me, but he was really jacked, that we'd be like the Steiner brothers or something.
Right.
And I'd be like the big guy.
B. Scott.
right. But no.
What's about promo guys?
But instead, you know, I looked like, this is what they ended up telling me was how they saw it at the Ring of Honor camp, where I got really good feedback, is they were just like, well, you look like you could be like the crazy genius who made him in a lab to be your tag partner. Like you.
I like that.
And so that was kind of their idea for the character. But it was only once they told me, hey, you don't look like the badass Scott Steiner guy. You know what I mean? You don't look like the huskier guy in this tag team. You just look like the crazy guy with the personality.
It's like the Bruce Pritchard or what was the Undertaker's?
Paul Bearer. Paul
Bearer, yeah. Obviously, you're bigger than those guys were, like, you know, muscular wise. But you know, was it that kind of role?
Well, I mean, I was in the ring, you know what I mean? But the you know, as part of the tag team, but Pete had this, like, incredible, like, flashy offense. You know what I mean? So I had the ability to sell and tell the story in the ring and all that sort of thing. But then Pete could come in and just dazzle.
He was like a high flyer and
right.
all that.
So he would do, yeah. One of the coolest memories, I talked to Pete today. It's funny that he called me this morning. And he got in the movie that we made at Columbia. He's the wrestler in the wrestling scene.
That's cool.
And so anyway, okay, the finish of the match, like, we've been killing it at this seminar, and I don't care if you were there, you know. Okay, so we're killing it at this seminar. It comes down to our last match, and we couldn't use the top rope because the ceiling was low in the training facility at Ring of Honor. And Pete does this 630, right, which is like a 1 3/4 flip off the top rope and lands on the guy with his shoulders.
Oh, wow.
So he couldn't do this, but I went around making sure everybody knew he could do it. I took my phone and I showed every single trainer at the thing. I was like, no, you should see he does this and another thing. But we couldn't do it live in the ring. So we had to come up with a finish. And so Pete does this. He also does this corkscrew moonsault, which is just a backflip with a full twist and lands on the guy. And
very athletic.
Yeah, he's insane. All right. But so he was going to do a corkscrew lion salt to end the match. But we didn't know if he'd be able to do it because he hadn't been able to jump on the ropes or anything the whole seminar.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah. And we're not, like, able to just go in there and jump in the ring. I mean, just, you know, we have to behave like professionals. You know, we're trying to get a job here.
Right.
And so we're just like, well, I guess we'll try it. And so, like, the match, everything goes pretty much to plan. And then I'm laying on the ropes looking up, and I'm just like, okay, Pete. And he takes off running, hits the second rope. And I'm, like, underneath, like, looking up, like I'm looking up at this light. And he jumps, twists in the air, doing this full backflip. It was like it's in slow motion. And he lands 1, 2, 3. And the place erupted. Even though this was all wrestlers and trainers and producers who've seen everything. We've been there.
Still, if you go over with, like, the guys that are going to judge you the hardest,
right?
That's crazy.
And then the proof is in the pudding. We got booked the next week, and he ended up doing the tours of Japan, and I went on to do a few things.
That's awesome.
And so but I mean, that was one of the best memories ever, and it was just being there with everything on the line and actually getting it. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
And there's so many the roller coaster of that.
I can imagine. A lot of traveling too. Was Terry at this convention, or was he in? Because I know he still kind of did Japan stuff too.
Oh, at this time, he was very rarely doing like any kind of seminar, but because of the connection with Manny, Terry trained Manny.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So he's just around.
which was funny at the seminar because he came and since I knew Manny, I got to take I got to go out to dinner with him the night before and hung out, and so he got to know me a little bit, you know what I mean, and but anyway, it was funny because Manny would always be the kind of, I mean, literally the bully in the room about stuff, but then when him and Terry were there, you could see the respect, like he deferred to Terry, and it was super cool.
Yeah, I've seen that happen before with this guy I did a couple of co-writes with was a guy that I looked up to, somebody I put on a pedestal with songwriting and stuff like that. And I went to work with him and his producer, who was working as an engineer for this session. And but the songwriting partner I had, his name is Tuck Smith. I'm actually wearing his T-shirt. He went in to do background vocals and stuff like that, singing high harmonies and stuff like that with me. And this entire time, he was giving me the football coach treatment and stuff like that, really like pushing me and just motherfuckering me into good takes. And then he gets in the studio to do his background vocals, and then the guy that was his mentor, the engineer, was motherfuckering him into good takes.
and that's what we all need.
Exactly.
Somebody to
really push you.
Right. And so, okay. So now the idea of Briarcliff, the reason, I mean, I have the experience of producing, for a pretty elaborate band, but I mean, it was nothing, we didn't win a Grammy or anything like that.
But you did it.
Right. And we followed through, we learned the process, Mike, who's our producer now, went on to work professionally in that. But for me, the reason I feel like I have something to offer is that whereas my band was never really meant to be a commercial band, it was more of an art rock project and things like that. We wanted to be well known enough to, be able to keep doing it, but and to get in front of people. But with wrestling, I had to learn all the hard things about marketing and polishing an act, and I was at the level of, okay, I was never world champion of a huge, international promotion, but I did wrestle in front of their, sold out pay-per-view audience. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And they had the same, I was just as capable of ruining those shows as anyone else on it.
Yep.
And so,
it's the big stage.
I know what it's like to have the faith of a machine behind you and everything on the line, and what you actually have to be able to do. See, like you're a great example of this on, guitar, bass, and every other instrument we put you on at the jams, Tommies, or whatever we need, is to do a thing, you have to just be able to do the thing.
Right.
For wrestling, you had to be able to show up an hour before bell time and be confident in what you could do, make the crowd love you or hate you, put on a dramatic performance that everybody could react to, wasn't going to embarrass anybody, right? Sell your merchandise, get on the road, go home. And you just had to be a professional.
Yeah.
If you didn't get a million takes, somebody put you in front of a microphone, it's time to talk. So, you can't go back in the curtain after you come out.
Right.
And one of the things that we need to do, is musicians and, is just be able to show up and do the thing.
Exactly. And not a lot of, I've played with a lot of musicians. There's not that many that embrace that kind of mindset, especially with like rock and roll and stuff like that. I know a ton of great rock and roll musicians, but some are still kind of caught up in the Keith Richards myth.
What is that?
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll all day, every day, that kind of thing.
Right. And you just have to keep all of that in check. There's just, like I said, there's a lot of temptation all around because, I mean, in wrestling, even just being on the road, you can sort of do what you want. I mean, and there's plenty of people that you're going to meet that will facilitate you doing what you want.
And there's free drinks everywhere. We were talking about this before we started rolling about how easy it is to just be a functioning alcoholic if you're like, your job is to travel, 2 weeks in a row and then a break 2 weeks in a row and this, that, and the other, being the traveling, working entertainment,
right?
Employee or whatever, or entertainer, or whatever. Right.
And there's plenty of people doing it, and then they have the myth of it's making them more creative or this or that, and it's just, it has to, there's no magical chemical, you know what I mean?
Right.
Everything that your brain does, it can do. It's just some things facilitate opening those doors.
Exactly.
So there's just you have to find. You have to find a balance somewhere. I'm not telling anybody not to.
No, everybody operates differently too.
Right. Yeah. But I lost the thread there. We were talking about the.
We're talking about Terry Funk and wrestling and Briarcliff and how all these experiences come together.
Right. So now I just feel like, as far as running a show and knowing what it takes, because I've done everything from co-produce a film to be on set at HBO. Like I've from the wrestling and all these things. Like I've seen enough of a highly produced environment and what it takes to put together these huge productions that I feel like, and then also I'm just getting reps. We're doing 3-4 events a week over here.
Woo!
Yeah. And, just seeing what it takes to make shows run smoothly and finding the people who can do that, at these eateries and breweries right now that can catch people's attention, but more importantly, that we build a community, a place for everyone to do this. And it really, to me, it doesn't seem like it should take anyone being a huge star to create an environment where we can all create a Charlotte sound. We can have our own music culture here, and everyone can be as involved as they want and not necessarily have to travel, but there will be. We've already have some touring acts coming through to do Briarcliff shows in January, and in December we have a sessions artist coming through. We'll talk about that stuff, in the coming weeks. But so we are trying to build the connection where touring acts can come and be in front of a community, musicians and musician fans, right? But also to get our artists in touch with people who are doing this thing on the road and making it happen too. So I really just think if we can get everybody rubbing against each other in the right way, we can create the fire we need.
And part of it too is that I can only speak for myself as far as any working players that come through, but there's always killer players to sit down with. And I've been playing like Brandon Henry. We mentioned him earlier. I've known him for a long time, luckily, and we've already kind of found our connection there. But then you get guys like Sticks that played drums.
Oh, he's amazing.
And Jake Houdenbank played a couple of weeks ago, and that was a lot of fun. He just kind of showed up with his girlfriend Helena, who plays in Death August, just hanging out. And he and I just started talking about guitars and stuff like that because he's a killer player too. And then that kind of opened that door. And then everything at Tommy's is always like a fun little experiment too.
Right.
I kind of look at that as a way to kind of escape. It's like an escape from my other bands that have like a thing going on, a set thing going on. And at Tommy's and Legion, I can kind of just do what I want and express however I want, depending on who's playing with me and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want to create, is a place where people can feel free to play again.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everything needs to always be improvisational. And it's not right now. And I'm trying not to conceptualize it too much.
No,
I realize
you got songwriters like Zach and guys that have songs ready to go, and enough players that know the songs well enough to just hop up and play with them.
And this week I've got Preston playing, and I'd only seen him do either his singer-songwriter thing or doing like a blues jam. But then at Tommy's, we had like the manager back there doing like a prog rock thing, and then a really proggy bass line by Yogi. And then I'd never seen Preston play anything like this, but he was like, "Oh no, keep them going, keep them going." And then he started playing, and it ended up being this really awesome, improv thing. And you just never know what different things can come out of just putting different players together. And so, I mean, I'm hoping, that people form relationships and want to have and develop material and things out of that. But we can always kind of throw them back in the mix with more spontaneity and things too.
So there's a lot of jazz trios and a lot of jazz musicians here in Charlotte too. It's a lot more of that than say even country players and stuff like that. Because I was talking to a guy that I play drums with. He said that Charlotte already kind of has a huge jazz history, and I'm not that well versed in it by any means. So that's interesting to know, because all the good drummers that I've played with, especially older ones, kind of got involved with that or learned how to play jazz as a result. Same with the bass players. A lot of bass players here in town. Brandon for one, and he's got that 6-string that'll just jazz out on too, and I'm sure Styx comes from that school too.
Styx is interesting because, and I've got to talk with him, on one of these too. He's so his family is musical. His mom was a drummer and named him Styx. That's his real name,
which is incredible,
right? And so he's played since he was a baby, I imagine, and he's got perfect pitch, perfect timing. Just and people just come up and congratulate him at Legion. Last time we left, he was like, "I'm not used to everybody complimenting me like this." People were just coming up just to congratulate him.
Man, I don't know what kind of discipline he had with for it or whatever, but it's definitely some of the tightest drumming I've played with anybody.
Yeah, and he'll be this Saturday, and he's with me the next couple of weekends, and then
So I was gonna say. So I wound up playing with 3 bands on Saturday.
Oh wow!
So with you guys, and then I got 2 shows, 2 sets of the Milestone afterwards.
Oh wow! Okay. So you got 2 different bands at the Milestone too.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what are you playing so early?
Yeah, I was I'll be doing y'all's thing. And the good thing about the Milestone is that punk rock time means about 9:30, something like that.
Right. Yeah, well, we've done that before with I try to work with everybody, and that's the other thing too is there's not Briarcliff's not about having any kind of control over any of the artists.
No, there's a lot of freedom there,
and so I want people to. I mean, my bet is that the infinite possibilities will create a big enough pie to where there'll be crumbs from it for everybody, and enough for us all to get what we need out of it. If we can really just turn this thing and make it a true sandbox where all the artists collaborate, share ideas, people are going to become big fans of that. It's happened over and over again in history, and you see the talent that it's emerged. I mean, we've only been really we've been doing Tommy's open mic for just about a year. And in that time, the level of, and doing the sessions videos and everything, but the level of players who've come through is just unbelievable.
Staggering.
But I think we're running long on time, or at least we're running short on battery. But we'll talk more. We'll get more things going. You'll be at a lot of our events going forward, and eventually we're going to branch out into some more venues. I'm working on that right now, and we're going to keep everybody working, keep everybody doing projects, and we're going to try to have as much fun as possible, which
Absolutely.
is the other thing.
I mean, it's like a full-time job, probably, right?
Right. Yeah. At this point, it is pretty much my full-time job. Just trying to keep the booking straight, the different obligations. Then we started doing different praise and worship videos for this new church, Renewed Faith Christian Center.
I saw one of those.
Yeah, right. And so we started doing that, and then we're doing a lot of sound and events for them. Now we're branching into private parties and other things. So just any way that, and then eventually the soundtrack, some soundtrack stuff, and just anything we can do. The way I see it, we just need as much going on as possible so that everybody can find their niche and their place.
Exactly. You got to stay busy. You got to stay booked. Right.
Right. And so that's what's keeping me going right now is keep everybody moving.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
I mean, if we're running short, we can pick back up where we are. But yeah, I mean, it's all about like, I was listening to a guy the other day talk about, getting placements and, working with doing production work with like this, that, and the other. And how like, as soon as he thinks like that he's got to like, once he thinks he's dried up, something else comes up. And that's the good problem to have.
Right. I think if we go toward being the best at what it is we're interested in, and then so spend your time getting good at the things that you're good at, that you have a talent for, the problems you see how to solve that other people aren't. Because chances are the reason you see them is because you're the person who needs to solve them. And then if you work on that, and then you find the person who needs those problems solved, then you've got a match made in heaven.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what it is. We just prepare, and then eventually, by being everywhere, you end up being around the people who need you.
Exactly.
And especially if you keep your mind open.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, anyway.
I think that's a good stopping point.
Well, hell yeah.